What do we hear from the opposition? Demagogical arguments to say that the law provides essentially, according to this opposition, provides for disproportionate sentencing, the law provides for unfettered powers of police, and that for the first time, as if in this country, police will have some powers of arrest without warrant. They are bent upon instilling fear in this country, and I will take a few minutes, with permission of my friend Chief Whip, to dispel this fear in the population. Let me come to the proportionality of sentencing, which was raised by the Honorable Leader of Opposition. He even stated that when he heard me or when he looks at me, he thinks of Pinochet. I will not bear grudge to the Honorable Leader of Opposition for thinking of Pinochet when he looks at me, because I know that his consultants who have written his speech and who sit in Gordon Tower building have put that in his speech. I will not bear him grudge. Let me come to the proportionality of sentencing. What is the sentencing provided now in the new law? 200,000 or even 500,000 rupees? The fine, which was 500 rupees, which is still 500 rupees, lies in the Public Health Act. That act, Mr. Speaker, dates to 1925. If I am not mistaken, in 1925, the central bankers perhaps will have to confirm it, in 1925, with 500 rupees, you could probably buy property in this country. Such was the value of money. If we look at the consumer price index over the number of years from 1925 to 2020, what does it come to? So is 200,000 rupees or even 500,000 rupees disproportionate when we compare to what was the situation in 1925? It is not disproportionate. Secondly, it is not disproportionate when you think of the consequences of propagating a virus which is deadly and which has been proven to be deadly. Let me come to the very sad, dramatic case of Dr. Chong. When Dr. Chong met his patient, at no time the patient reveals to the doctor that he could be potentially infected with COVID-19. And Dr. Chong is not aware at the time he's treating his patient that he is a potential carrier of COVID-19 virus. What is the end result? Both patient and doctor are no longer with us today. Should we not legislate to impose a duty to provide information? Should we not legislate to provide that it is an offense if you fail to do it? We will live up to our duty, and we will include in the legislation what needs to be included, because we believe that we are doing what is right. Let me come to the alleged unfettered powers of the police to arrest. Unfortunately, they have instilled so much fear that this has reached a stage where I have read letters even coming from le diocèse. On parle des pouvoirs accrus de la police. Qu'est-ce que ça veut dire pouvoir accru de la police? Ça veut dire plus de pouvoir comparé à la situation antérieure. Est-ce qu'on a donné des pouvoirs accrus à la police, monsieur le Speaker? Laissez-moi lire la section 11 du Quarantine Bill tel que devant la Chambre. Merci. Le Quarantine Bill, section 11, I quote, clause 11, police powers. 11, police powers. A police officer, A, shall provide such assistance as may be reasonably required by a quarantine officer under this act. B, a police officer may, B, board a ship or an aircraft, enter premises without a warrant, arrest without a warrant a person whom he has reasonable cause to believe has committed an offense under this act or any regulations made under this Act. End of quote. We have borrowed, Mr. Speaker, sir, this section, this clause, from another legislation. Let me read the legislation from which we have borrowed it. I quote from the other legislation. I'm going to give the title of the legislation from which we have borrowed. I quote, Section 10, Police Powers. Every police officer shall enforce compliance with this Act and with any order, instruction, or condition lawfully made, given, or imposed by a person under the authority of this Act. Every police officer, B, may board any ship or aircraft and enter any premises without a warrant. A police officer may arrest without a warrant any person whom he has reasonable cause to believe has committed any offense under this Act. End of quote. Question, Mr. Speaker, sir, from where did we borrow this? From the Quarantine Act of 1954. It is word for word a replica of what is in the Quarantine Act of 1954. And none of the lawyers sitting over there have taken the pain to check the existing legislation called the Quarantine Act 1954. Oh, they have checked it and deliberately chosen not to mention that it already exists in the Quarantine Act 1954, and they have deliberately, out of demagogy, instilled fear in the population of this country. There is more, Mr. Speaker. They pretend that it is for the first time that we speak of arrest without warrant. There is another legislation, Mr. Speaker, sir, called the District and Intermediate Courts Criminal Jurisdiction Act. Mr. Speaker, sir, do you know when this legislation was enacted in this country? In 1888. In the DIC, commonly called the DIC Criminal Jurisdiction Act, even a private person can arrest without warrant when he sees a crime committed or attempted to be committed or a dangerous wound given. That's section 16 of the DIC Criminal Jurisdiction Act. I quote it. A private person who sees a crime committed or attempted to be committed or a dangerous wound given may, without warrant, arrest the offender. Are we reinventing the wheel? And Section 22 of that DIC Criminal Jurisdiction Act, an officer, of course, speaking of a police officer, an officer may arrest a party without warrant in all cases where a private person may so arrest, and also on a reasonable charge made of a crime committed or of dangerous wounds inflicted by the party arrested. Le contrôle, Monsieur le Président, c'est par le magistrat, where the prisoner or the arrested person is taken before a magistrate, as has always been the case and will always be the case in our country. This is the level of the argument of this opposition. Finally, in the quarantine bill, it is very clearly stated that the power given to the police officer is to provide assistance as may reasonably be required by a quarantine officer under this Act. Paragraph A and paragraph B have to be read together and not like they have done disjunctively. This is a basic cardinal rule of statutory interpretation as far as the law school I have attended is concerned. I do not know which law school they qualified.